Welcome to the TABNation podcast, of course, the official podcast of Trekkers Against Bullying. Just a couple quick announcements real quick before we start into the program. We're now very happy to be on the Subspace Radio Network, which is part of the Federation, and you can catch us there. I don't have a schedule yet, but we'll get it soon, and we'll get it out to everybody about when we will be on there. It will just be the audio and not the video right now, but you can catch the audio right there on Subspace Radio, part of the Federation, and we are excited to be there. All right, today, of course, we've got a kind of different kind of episode that we've done, and we've been wanting to do these for a while, and we've been wanting to bring in members of TAB, and actually the person we have with us today is actually on the TAB podcast too, and I'll introduce him in just a second. But we wanted to bring people in. We wanted to get some of their experiences with bullying, whether it's still going on, whether they're a survivor at this point. So we're really happy to have somebody here today. But let me go ahead and introduce the host. We have a couple of people that aren't on camera today, but that's okay. We all know how that goes some days. So along with myself, Rex Wood, the director of TAB, we also, of course, have Kat King with us. And Kat is, of course, a producer, a musician. Oh my gosh, she can go on and on and on and on about things that she does. But Kat, say hello.
Hey, hey, hey.
There she is. And we also have Ellie, of course, from Over the Seas. And Ellie, good afternoon.
Oh, hello, hello.
And then we also have on audio line, we have Bonfire, who is our kind of resident expert a little bit, can talk a little bit to the to some of the other things that are a little bit more about the psychology, mental health, psychology. Thank you for helping me today. So anyway, and then our guest today is actually our audio producer, a large Star Trek fan. He's actually an audio producer for the Seventh World Broadcast. He is all over the place. And of course, we have Mr. Scott Jensen with us today. Welcome, Scott.
Hello, everybody.
Great. So, we're going to just kind of dig into it, Scott. We're going to start out a little bit about your history with bullying, what went on with you, what you saw out there. And then, of course, the hosts are going to pop in, ask you questions like we always do. So we'll just let you tell your story right now. So go ahead, Scott.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Oh, wow. It starts a long, long time ago on an island far away. Back in the 80s
galaxy?
or so. No galaxy, still this one, and still this continent too. Yeah, and I came up back in the mid to late 80s. Was my formative years of forming my brain and my psyche and all that other fun stuff. In a time where a lot of the nerdy things that I naturally gravitated to weren't accepted at all by the public. Very, very little. I mean, I think everybody liked the Star Wars movies, and that was about it. But I became a comic book nerd at a very young age because I had a problem with reading and a lot of learning disabilities and dyslexia that back then didn't have proper spotlights on them like they do now. Mm-hmm. So I was just put into classes in New York State. They threw everyone into classes, behavioral problems, learning disabilities, and everything else into one classroom. So it was pretty much a petri dish for any kind of bullying that could have possibly been. Overworked teachers, overtaxed school system entirely. 70 kids per class, coming up in a time where you didn't have as many safeguards as we do now. So my inability to read and be as affluent as other people were at that age led to a lot of bullying and stuff like that. And why I brought up comics was because comics actually, strangely enough, have a very, very big part in me being able to read at all. And coming into Star Trek and all this other stuff is because having the photograph of the action going on while the words were there was what led to a lot of examples for me to be able to read and to just pull in this entire these worlds and universes that we all love so much now. And there was a lot of nasty stuff that I'd rather not in detail bring up that happened in the 80s, but it was a lot of physical bullying. Right. I don't want to say one is more dangerous than the other, because they both did happen to me.
Mhm.
And everybody's experience is different as well. Everybody's experience is equal, it's just different.
Right.
And there was some crazy moments of, the best being my comic books taken away, or my books being taken away and thrown in the toilet or the trash or stuff like that.
Mhm.
Every single movie trope that could have happened probably happened.
Right.
Um, and I got eventually to an age where thankfully I moved 800 plus miles away,
Mhm.
right at around the same summer I hit my growth spurt and went to 6'5",
Yeah.
like almost overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
And
probably
when you
helped you a
move,
little bit,
it helped a good bit, like on the physical aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it only compounded a lot of the mental health issues, because
Right.
I moved 800 miles and I moved to South Carolina. I live probably about 30 minutes south of Clemson University.
Mhm.
And back then I showed up and, I was this, 6.5 foot, basically, guy that came from Long Island, and rumors started and I just let them happen and people left me alone. But
Mhm.
um, I have found that unfortunately through the years, I had listened to what these bullies were saying while they were punching me or, kicking me.
Mhm.
And that gets a whole lot deeper, because that's a scar that in a time a lot of folks didn't pay attention to. Because
Mhm.
you could pay attention to a broken arm and you want to open the door for somebody. Pay attention to somebody who's got a cast on their leg and you want to help them out. But when you can't see the injury, it's a completely different story, particularly in a time when there was a lot of toxic masculinity, a
Mhm.
lot of toxic, just man up and take it. Why can't you take it? Just punch him back and he'll leave you alone,
Yeah.
which is not smart
Mhm.
on any.
Nope.
And that led to a lot of me believing, and unfortunately surrounding myself with a lot of people who I called friends or colleagues, and eventually people in relationships with, that carried this bullying on in a mental and social way
Mhm.
up until about 3 years ago. To be honest with you, I
Wow.
developed a lot of different anxiety disorders, and I turned to alcoholism or alcohol and became a pretty raging alcoholic for a while because of it. I'm 5 years and a couple months sober right now. So
That's great. That's great. I know that I'm proud of you for that. And I know there's a lot of people that are proud of you for that. You're able to do that 5 years. Absolutely.
that's definitely, it's a one moment at a time battle I
Mhm.
found to face it myself. But yeah, I had eventually had to shake myself and tell myself that what you're carrying from 1985, dude, is you're the only one that's perpetuating it at this point in my head. And I had to give myself some space and myself some credit and get out of my own way,
Mhm.
and say, there are way more people that appreciate and love you than the person who I accidentally almost named right now, but I'm not going to do it, did back in
It's okay.
1980 blank, whatever it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I only wish the best for him now, but um, yeah, so it's been a long road. It's a daily road, honestly. And I find that any kind of issues, I feel like the root of bullying particularly comes from places where people lack compassion. Uh,
Mhm.
Most of the time, I feel most bullies that I have ever met within working 20 years in the comic book industry or working in sci-fi and social media for all that kind of stuff, is their bullies are people that are also not being given compassion. And it's not there's no excuse, but there's explanations as to why everything has become that way.
Mhm.
And I feel that they can be reached with compassion, and these people could be such an advocate for anti-bullying and positivity after they've been reached and realize what the roads they've been going about are so false for so many years. And
Right.
I would hope that I can reach out to other people that way as well. So
Right. Right. Interesting. Interesting. So you talked about moving down to South Carolina. And what age were you then when you moved to South Carolina?
I got here, and then it was a couple weeks later I turned 16.
Okay. All right. So starting those really more teenage years at that point in school, and having the stuff kind of follow you a little bit at that point down there. What were some of the things, or were there any techniques at that time that you used to get yourself through it? That anybody you relied on that was actually somebody there for you, or were you involved in did you get any help from somebody?
Well, I always have had a very supportive family.
Okay.
My parents, my mom I'm basically like probably a rerun of her, I think, which I'm totally cool with. My dad is very, very much product of having grown up in the 50s and 60s on Long Island and being a Navy man and being he grew up in a harder time. And funny enough, now in his 70s, when he's got great granddaughters to bounce on his knees, he's come around to a lot of this, and it's been really cool reconnecting with him on a lot of that. And I have two sisters as well that have always, my little sister is probably my best friend in the universe now. And they were always there for me. But I did feel like, when you're out there at school or you're out there at your job, because I was working at the same time. When I moved down here, I started working right away because it's how we went. And you have people at work that do that kind of stuff as well. You feel like you're out there in the field. And while you have a great support group at home and you try to take that with you and everything, some of that stuff will still cut deep, because you expect your mom to tell you you're the smartest kid in the room. You expect your mom to tell you that you could play that trombone when, boy, I can't, and things along those lines.
So were you a trombone player then?
I started playing trumpet in elementary school.
Yeah.
I got away from all of that. I played trombone for a little while. I got back to it now. I actually have it sitting out right over here, but I live in an apartment, so it's really bad to practice that.
Yeah, they kind of.
But another support group and a place to hide, like you were talking about, actually was in music. Very much so. As a kid on Long Island, my neighbor used to fix his Thunderbird perpetually in the front yard. He would constantly just be arms deep in that, and he had a boombox player that he would just play punk rock out of, and just play Ramones and play Social Distortion, play all that 80s hardcore, and play all that stuff that I felt when I listened to it was all just pure emotion and just firing on it. And to this day, obviously, greatest band in the world, Ramones. I would take all that stuff and I would stick the headphones on my ears, and I would always take walks because I had my headphones on, I had my music blasting, and I would take, coming up where I did, and then moving here, a lot of not open space, but a lot of avenues to just literally walk down with my headphones on and to kind of find my center, I felt, and my core that way. And I feel like a lot of it was maybe some turtle shelling and a lot of pulling into myself, which is what I'm trying to strip away now and opening up with other people. It's a lot of learned behavior to hit in your early 40s that you're trying to, back up and retread and fix this point. But
well, in bands, sometimes, like I said, like you said, music is definitely a good place to go. Bands sometimes can be that point of bullying too within a high school too. The band members, I can remember being in band, and I can remember playing on the football field, and the football players really didn't respect the band at times. And it would be plenty of times of being run over and balls thrown at us and stuff like that. So I see that. But you find a lot of good friends within that group too, because
I'm glad that art wasn't that dangerous, boys, but we still got made fun of in art class too, the whole art crew. But a lot of the band folks, sorry I interjected on you there, but a lot of the band students are really where I found some of my support as well, because we all kind of had similar experiences of not being, the quarterback or the cheerleader or whatever the popular thing was at the time.
High school can be high school, even grade school, junior high, all that can be a really hard time in everybody's life. Very traumatic, because, that just so many people are wanting you to be conform to a certain way at that point. So, Kat, do you have anything you want to ask Scott?
No, I just, I think it's really quite a gift to be able to, listen to your story, at least just to hear what kind of environment that you grew up in, and how you persevered through it all.
Mhm.
It's a gift to be able to hear each other's stories, and so that's it. I'm here to listen today.
Absolutely. So, um, let's go into like some of the other things that happened to you. What kind of other interests did you have in high school other than the comic books and things?
Well, I started. I came up watching Spock and Kirk on TV and
Yes.
Bones,
Yep.
and I came up on reruns because I wasn't alive when it was on. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have see it. Be the cultural icon.
Well, you're around for TNG though.
I was very much.
really-
I literally remember sitting in the shopping cart and Pathmark in what was that, 84, 84
Mm-hmm.
when it was on
Yeah.
the way. I
Yeah.
feel like TNG. And I
Yeah.
remember my dad buying me the TV guide because I'd nagged him the entire time we were in that grocery
Mhm.
store that had the preview. And I couldn't believe how much this new first officer looked, in my mind, exactly like Kirk. And how are we going to be able to tell them apart?
Right.
Little kid ways. And yeah, definitely I latched onto Star Trek at an early age.
Mhm.
Sci-fi in general as well. Lots of watched DS9 and Voyager all the way through for sure. DS9 has got a very deep spot in my heart because of the stories that it does tell, and
Right.
because particularly a lot of the stories with Nog. Honestly, this
Yeah.
last watch through with the Seventh Rule has been unbelievably amazing to
Mhm.
be that detailed on it, and to see the kind of adversity that Nog faced. And
Mhm.
he did a cultural bullying. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
you can't join Starfleet because you're just a greedy Ferengi. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody immediately bullied this
Mhm.
kid, and what it took was compassion of his best friend teaching him how to read against their parents' wishes in a cargo bay,
Mhm.
leads to this kid one day piloting a ship and saving the galaxy in the biggest war we'd ever had
Right.
because somebody reached out to him and was a friend with him,
Right.
and believed that Nog could do everything that he wound up doing.
Sure. Sure.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, sci-fi was a place I moved into. Also
Mhm.
got really therapeutically into writing,
All right.
which has wound up, as far as any kind of arts go or music or anything that I could have been.
Mhm.
Writing poetry has been my constant purest form of expressing emotion,
Okay.
and to put it on paper.
Okay.
And regardless if it's good or bad, just keep putting it out, because if it's terrible, it's my terrible that I created.
Right.
No
Right.
one else could have made that. And lots of fun and lots of good times sharing that with people, because I hope that there could be something I write that could hit somebody in a time they need to hear it, so
Right.
they know they're not by themselves, because isolation is horrible.
So
And
were you doing
God,
a
I know
lot of
you're
journal writing or what?
lots of journal writing. I have I have journals I would rather never look in from the early 90s.
Yeah.
That is for sure. Um, Lots of at the point where we were getting actual storage devices and thumb drives we can carry around. And I
Mhm.
would just open up a document word processor on my dad's Tandy and stuff like that,
Right.
and just type stuff out, or just fill out marble notebooks. I've got stacks and stacks of marble
Right.
notebooks all over the
Right.
place. I've got some in storage. And
Mhm.
thankfully now I could open up a laptop and put that physically in one place, or put that one place.
Yep.
Doesn't pile up. But yeah, just as much as I can. I've put together some chapbooks and stuff over the
Mhm.
years, and shared them with friends, and it's definitely my favorite outlet. And I like to tell anybody to give it a try. Open up a piece of, or open up a notepad, or just get a piece of paper if you're more comfortable with that, and
Mhm.
sit down and write whatever comes to mind, and just get it all out. Get it out, even if you never go back and read it again. Just get it all out, put it on paper, put it into the world, so it's not just up here.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So
that's for
you
sure.
talked
I
about
like to do
having
a
go
practice of
ahead. No, go ahead. Go
uh,
ahead.
What was that?
I like to do a practice sometimes of taking those, like some of that information, and like doing like a release and burning it is like another way. Like if I know it's something I want to get out of my system, out of my head, I know it's not me, it's just the stuff, rumbling out there, but it's that frenetic energy. One of the practices that I found that's really helpful is to like write the letters to the people who, who I've hurt, who've hurt me, either or, but then, again, getting it out there, and then especially if it's something where you can't access that person like anymore. But then to do like some sort of, go out back if you have a fire pit or whatever, and just, release it that way as well and say goodbye to that aspect of, what you lived through. So I really love that Scott, that you have focused in on writing. That's been one of my areas as well. I'm curious, did you, like, with your experience with school and the teachers, did you have any adults and teachers that were there as allies for you in the back end? Like, I had my art teacher and a social studies teacher. Like, there were a couple people who kind of passed, the baton, so to speak, to keep me level headed through all the bullying. But I was curious, did you have anything along that line, Scott?
In the very early stages in middle school, which I believe is probably one of the hardest points in our lives, is
Yeah.
the time that you spend in middle school. I unfortunately had a lot of teachers that were doing it too. And they were overworked. I understand now that, I mean, when you're dealing with 70 kids all day long, none of them want to be there. We were so underfunded that we all had to copy notes off of an overhead projector into pieces of paper, which also was a problem with me with my dyslexia and my tracking problems going from line to line. So unfortunately, in the very beginning of that, when I came here, I met Miss Chambers, who to this day, every now and then I'll see her mall walking. And I'll see her and she's still, oh, how are you doing, honey? Because I moved down here and I got skipped from art. They all of my credits for some reason didn't get taken when I got here. So I got pushed back and had to start stuff over again after I had done a full year worth of school year. I don't know how it happened. I don't know. I still don't understand the logic. It's been a billion years since then. But Miss Chambers skipped me to Art 4 when she saw some of the stuff that I was doing, because I've gotten into drawing and art and stuff like that because of comic book art and honestly growing up that close to a city that was covered in beautiful graffiti. I'm not gonna lie about that. And seeing that kind of stuff coming up and she really got behind me, and she wasn't the kind of teacher that looked at me and said, I believe you've got a diamond in the core of you and you've got to fight and get it. And she expected me to be good. She expected the quality of my artwork. And she's like, look, we're here and we both know you can do this. Just put it on paper, man. And then had a couple other teachers like that. I actually had a coworker at a record store when I was about 16 that I'm still friends with now, which is crazy because his daughter is almost the same age as he was when I met him. But who also, olive branched out to me, and he was one of the coolest people I met when I met him in the class in that school, like the first day that I was there, and I'll still talk to him now, because he's like, hey man, you look like a big old weirdo, let's hang out.
So were there any teachers specifically though that were worse than the other ones that you really considered were bullying you at the time?
Oh, absolutely. I remember a teacher, thank the great bird of the universe, and I don't remember the guy's name anymore, but the guy actually led the class in cheers, making fun of me, and because I was so stupid that I couldn't read out loud, because I had a hard time pulling off of the paper and putting it out now, which is why doing spoken word now is such a victory for me. I mean, I'm going to memorize it. I'm not going to read it and say it. I'm going to memorize it first and then. But he had led them in cheers and in song of mocking me, and then put me in a closet in the back of the room until the period was over with.
Wow.
So yeah, it was definitely, he would turn a blind eye when the three of them would start beating the crap out of me and taking my food. He'd be like, well, if you just man up, then you wouldn't have this problem.
Wow.
And I mean, all violence leads to is more violence. Right. And when I did hit back, I got hit back 10 times harder by all of them, because it's a battle that's here and here. It's not a physical battle.
Yeah. And so, we always see those movies that always talk about bullies fighting back, that you've got to fight back, that if you punch them once, they're going to go away. And that doesn't necessarily always work.
No.
And obviously you had some experiences with that where you tried to fight back and it just got worse at that point. The mental part of it is the hardest thing. I mean, like you said, physical is easy to get rid of. Bruises go away, but those internal bruises never go away, and I'm sure.
Actually,
go ahead.
I want to jump in on that. Actually,
sure, go ahead.
So what's interesting about so Scott, with your experience, and I do agree with you, like it's nothing is worse or better abuse than any form. All abuse is abuse. All neglect is neglect. Um, what's interesting is about how trauma is formed has more to do with our own vulnerabilities. So luckily, it sounds like Scott had the opportunity to have some friends and some adults that were able to feed, your confidence there, Scott, which is really, that is your best, your best shield with bullies, is that you have your own self-confidence and can maintain that. But as you become more and more vulnerable, of course, the more weak you are, so to speak, either physically or emotionally or whatever we want to call it. Maybe weak's not the right word, but you know what I mean. The more depleted we are in those senses, the higher the impact of the trauma. And then some of the interesting psychology behind it is depending on how you experienced it and what was around you. Like if there was, if there had been a bloody nose, if there was anything along that line, interestingly enough, that all winds up being encoded in your brain. So trauma is actually your body's physical reaction to, something that had happened to you. It's your body trying to express it out. So that's really what the trauma is. And it's just kind of repeating those patterns over and over again. So at any rate, I want to rein myself back in here. My point being is like, really based off of like everybody's like every aspect of bullying that we've been through, there's so many different layers to it, and it actually could be. So for what it's worth, it could actually be built up into your body, especially when, I'm going to take a wild guess, Scott, because as a peer recovery addiction coach, as well as a person who is recovering from codependency, like at any rate, I'm on a ramble right now, but
No,
I
go
forget
ahead.
where I was
Go
going
ahead.
with that.
Go ahead.
I forgot my train of thought. Darn. See, this is the ADHD thing that kicks in on me sometimes. I lose my my ramble. But anyhow, let me get back to the point here. So bottom line is that the bullying is bullying, the trauma is trauma. The best thing is like we want to understand, I guess, how to best resource ourselves so that we can protect ourselves. So I know what I was getting at. There's a great book called The Body Keeps Score. And I can't pronounce his last name right now. I'll find it for our notes later. But there's a doctor who talks about how our body encodes that trauma response, internally. And then as Scott's talking about this, here we are in our 40s and we're like looking around like, hey, what's going on? Some of that is actually coming out physically, interestingly enough, because change is pain in the body. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's always you always bring such great information to the podcast.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also want to say shout out to Scott. Like I, again, deeply appreciate the vulnerability of your share there, that you're also on a recovery path. And I bow my head down to you for that. That you can see it, but my board head is bowing.
There you go. So Scott, let's talk about, you're talking a little bit about what you're doing today, your music. I actually heard some of your music. That's really great. So let's talk a little bit about your music and what you're doing there, and some of the other stuff that you're into that kind of come out of all this. It's the good part, right? It's the good part that's
definitely
come out of all this. So let's talk a little bit about your music and what you're doing there.
Oh, my music right now. I've played in probably more punk bands than I can count. I'm primarily a bass player. Did some vocals in a couple of the bands. That was just the hardest work I've ever done in my life, was doing vocal in a band where you gotta go that fast. But right now I've turned into producing instrumental hip hop, which has been another love for me since around the same time was getting into that old school stuff and being that close to Queens, where I feel like the best music that ever existed was birthed from with hip hop and punk. And I have taken on the name Enoch Wallace, which is a character from one of my favorite books, is Clifford D. Simak's The Way Station, and started putting out just themed sci-fi hip hop, instrumental hip hop, with a lot of overtones of chilling out, stuff like that. I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a full circle of making this thing that can have a little pocket universe you could jump into and listen to that with your headphones on. And that'd be the only place you were. Some of the best compliments I can ever get from it is like with the poetry, is I was completely there when I listened, or I was completely there, or what you were talking about, or what you were playing at the same time.
Sure. So it sounds like the music is something that you've really been able to get in. I don't want to get real personal here, but how's your relationships been? I mean, how has it affected you when it comes to that? Having somebody close and that kind of stuff. I mean, doesn't necessarily have to be girlfriend or whatever.
Oh, well,
just like friendships with adult people now. I mean, are there certain watch outs that you watch for?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely, yeah. Yeah, there's some, like I was talking about earlier, particularly, I don't know if I have enough time to go into all the
we got time.
Relationship bumbles that I have possibly gone through in the last however many years. I always thought that Tom Paris is like the coolest guy in the world. And I kind of I kind of wandered into that same type of attitude in a lot of places. Thankfully, it didn't land me in prison or like in another quadrant or anything like that. But I thought it probably was going to land me into 100 different Bolanas. And I got very much into that whole poetic way of, we're screaming and yelling at each other. That's got to mean that there's emotion, and it's got to mean that we're in love with each other. And I've ran into a lot of that. Is that like the purest and the loudest it could possibly be? And it led into something recently. Once again, I don't want to get too detailed on it, but
that's fine.
It led into a long time where I've been bullied in relationships where it's like, you're supposed to be the man here. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? You should do everything I say, or it means you don't love me. And that is absurd. That's emotional. It's taken a romantic hostage for years. That's not, having an open and honest two-way relationship.
Right.
I have had a couple issues with some friends here and there, and I wish them all well.
Right. Sure.
I wish them all well in their own lives where they are, not intersecting with mine. Just when they're things. I have, for real. Yeah, go over there. You're good. But I have found, particularly, I have a memory one time from way back of this guy that ran the comic shop when I was growing up. And how the guy would I'd come in the day before stuff come out, and he would let me flip through these issues. Probably something he shouldn't have done. But I mean, it was a different time and place. And he would always, again, like my art teacher later on, would expect intelligence from me, expect a range of emotion from me, expect me to be cool with people that came in. And I remember the refuge that I had in that spot, and that shop is still there on Long Island. I checked. It's moved down the road a little bit, but it's still in existence, and it made it through the pandemic. So I don't know how it happened, but and I have since then tried to, being a fixture in retail in the area, try to give a lot of people that same feel, because you don't know that doorbell rings, and I know you're in retail. I've been in retail for more years than I care to admit again, and it's tiring and it's hard this time of year.
Yes.
And everybody that you walk into frame with, and everybody that you meet every day is carrying so many subplots on their own, is carrying so many thoughts, so many emotions, a huge backstory that you have no idea about when you're just talking to them about how many packs of Magic they want to buy, or how many Pokemon cards their kids are looking for, or anything like that. And life becomes so much more rich and so much, I don't want to say easier to deal with, but more beautiful, and the river flows better when you are just talking to people and understanding that we're all this collection of stories. Sure. And harmonizing with them instead of trying to just scream and yell and get our points across, I guess.
Absolutely. So we've got Ellie on here, and Ellie, of course, is the younger generation. And unfortunately, we are still seeing a lot of bullying and things like that. What advice, she's been really good at controlling hers, but what advice would you give like younger people about, especially this young adult bullying that we're seeing and this social media bullying that we're seeing right now? I mean, in some ways, we got it all in person when we were younger, but now there's that whole social media thing. at the same
And
time.
that follows you because of that. Like,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the thing, is we might have been beat up, held up against the locker back in the day, and we can
Yeah.
move past that, but
Yeah.
things never really go away anymore.
Right. And just people just, there's so many platforms. It's, lately I wouldn't really call it trolling, but I go around and I listen. I'm a listener, is that from a Star Trek episode or what? Right.
Thing is what I call it.
Yeah, there you go. So I kind of listen to all these things that are going on with social media right now. And, TikTok has really gotten toxic lately, even worse than anything. And there are individuals on there that want to have debates, but it's not really what a debate should be. It's more of, I want to get somebody on here so I can bully them. And you see it all the time with some of these people that are on there. And I sit there and I listen to it. And, Sirach said in our last podcast about being the witness, right? And coming out and saying something when you see this stuff going on, that you shouldn't just be quiet. You need to call it out a little bit. And there's been times that I have called some out on TikTok at that point. But getting back to Ellie, you're dealing a lot more with social media and what's going on there. And we know with your cosplaying and everything else. So what advice would you give Ellie right now with dealing with social media and everything like that?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, from this old guy standpoint, I don't think we had it harder than you guys.
Right.
I don't think that we had it harder. I feel like we need to move to a future where all of this is going to be ancient history.
Right.
Everything that happens digitally, everything that might happen when we used to talk crap about each other in the kitchen phone, the cord stretched across the place. Everything is real. It is 100% real. It's not any more easier to deal with or anything along those lines. It's all real, and it all actually happens. It's all very valid. And every kind of reaction that you have to that is just as valid. And every kind of reactionary, you might want to lash back. It's the same as me, swinging at these kids. You might want to, don't feed trolls. And a lot of times all they want is that interaction, because they need to be validated, because they're not being validated in other points of their lives, because nobody's showing them an open ear or any kind of compassion in any point of their life. So they're trying to reach to get any kind of touch that they can get. And it's unfortunate that this is still happening, and it's morphed into whatever the heck it's morphed into. But just in the months that I've known you, I have already seen just expansion and growth in this situation. And I wish that I had the ability to just jump in and communicate with people the way that I've seen that you have. Just naturally the way that you do. You got a comm officer for sure right there.
Definitely.
So you have already got like a lead on so many people with that, and focus on that. There is nothing that you can't do. And eventually you're going to be able to reach out to somebody else, and they're going to hear everything that you've gone through. And I don't know if it'll make what you've gone through better, but it'll make it count for something. And it'll make it a tool that you can use. Because if you're one person and you help 3 people, you've already tripled the good out of a crap situation, 100%. So every day is a new day. It sounds corny. It sounds like a little cat poster on a wall, but as long as you keep moving forward, man. Yeah, you keep moving forward, dude. You gotta move forward in every situation. Even if forward is just standing up or getting out of bed, you're moving forward for real. So yeah, definitely everything is valid that has happened, but everything that is going to happen is also going to be valid as well. And you could turn garbage into gold for sure.
Very good.
And I have a question for you that's related to Ellie, because some of what happens, and I've witnessed, in her communications as well, is just folks who will latch on to the fact that English is not her first language. Honestly, think about it. Her brain is really growing a whole lot of different networks right now because she's
100%.
learning English with us all. So high five to you there, Ellie. But point being, Scott, did you have, when you went down south, I had this experience. Did you have an experience with Well, and Sirach mentioned this too as well, like how you spoke. I'm just curious if you were bullied around your accent per se from coming from Long Island. I certainly got
boy.
it down in Florida.
Yeah. Well, I am also the grandson of a Norwegian immigrant, and God rest Grandpa Ragnar's soul. The man made it to 99 years old, and I probably understood about 30% of what he was saying. But the dude lived his entire life. He came over here before my aunts were born, so it was probably in his 20s. And you learned an entirely different language. That's so much extra information in your brain. And anybody grew up with a lot of friends who were bilingual where I was. My school was maybe 30% white. So I definitely had exposure to other cultures at a very young age, which I think is amazingly and very important. Very important. And when I did move down here, a lot of people were like, hey man, say that word again. What'd you say about a while ago? And I said garbage can. Oh, he said garbage can. It's a trash can, you idiot. And just stuff like that. And I mean, I would retaliate with very smart remarks about the Civil War and stuff like that I won't go into. But
Oh, Scott, you and I are going to have a conversation outside of this later.
Absolutely. We're going to, because my sister has found
I know what you're
documents as
saying.
well. Yeah. Yeah. She's found some documents in our genealogy. It's been a lot of fun and vindicating. But yeah, it did happen. It's people will pick on any kind of difference, which to me will show you that they're picking on that difference. They're not picking on you. And the way that I spoke is an aspect of me. And I have a very hard fought and long learned retail middle of the road accent now. When I'm talking with my dad at holidays, or my older sister who still sounds like she's from Brooklyn, and we just start and we just get and my little sister's husband and my niece's husband, who were born and raised in this town, just shut off and disappear because they can't understand us. It's wonderful. I love the two of them, but it's absolutely hilarious. But definitely, yeah, people will choose. They will. Again, like I said earlier, I did grow about a foot and a half or so in that year, so I was a little bit more physically imposing. So I tried to balance that. Never raised my hand a moment to anyone that I moved down here in any of those situations. But at the same time,
in my situation, I did actually have the teacher with the group like bullying me because I was from I was from New York, and it did turn into like quite literally just this horror. Luckily I moved like shortly after that, but part of me was like, you're calling me names, not realizing where my lineage is actually from, and my family wasn't even living over here at the time. I'm like, but then to have the teacher sit there and let it happen, that was incredibly lonely. And that's why I was curious, because at least in other schools I went to, I did have those teacher resources where I could quietly go to them, and the bullies didn't have to know about it, because you get made fun of for going to an adult. But I mean, there's ways to do it where you can get the help. But anyhow, back on task. The language thing, we really shouldn't be making fun of anybody over how they speak. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It is, I think, and it being in the spoken word world and in the poetry world, a dialect is so beautiful. A combination of, I mean, my first real love, she was Puerto Rican, and she go in and out of so many different just ways of saying things, and it's a fingerprint. It's an auditory fingerprint. And working with all of the audio engineering that I do now, and the gigantic headphones and the FLAC files and the WAV files and going over the same sentence 17 times over and over again to make sure. And language is beautiful, and it's what makes you different. It's not, it makes you something that nobody else can be.
Yeah.
And a mixture of it is even going to do that twice as much. So
I can see, Ellie, you were going to say something there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I want to say thank you for your kind words. Secondly, I am dyslexic as well. And 2 weeks ago, I finished my English exam for C1's English certificate, and I passed. So right now I have a C1 certificate, and next year, I will start my dream job, which is English instructor for little kids. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, yes.
When you're getting ready to hit that new exciting adventure of coming from one country to another.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
now you're going to see some things. I mean, we all hear about the terrific things about America, but you're also going to see some of the things that are not so terrific, at times. And
Yeah. And
but go ahead.
I can practice my English as well as I will be in Czech family. So
Mhm.
so I'm excited about
Well,
it.
and I can tell you just from the time that I've met you, your English has gotten so much better. You're starting to actually get some things that maybe you weren't getting before. I've also noticed that you don't take as much time to have to think about the word like you
Yeah.
did before. Like, what do I want to say? And that to me has got to be really difficult to be, in that situation. I mean, I grew up here where people understood almost everything I said, and trying to reach for a word. I mean, yeah, sometimes I have a problem trying to find the word, but at the same time, people will understand it.
Yeah.
And
Actually,
it's got to
yeah,
be really hard. Yeah.
yeah, actually, I have a quite Trek family on TikTok, and actually,
Mhm.
they surprise me that if I can learn English, they want to learn Czech
That's
from me. So
very cool.
we just switching, and I'm learning English from them, and they learn Czech from me. So yeah.
So what do you find the hardest in the English language? I mean, what do you find that's the hardest thing? Like, I mean, you haven't even got into slang yet. And when you get over here and you get into some of the slang that happens here, trust me.
She's been getting good on some of the stuff with me on the side, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. But I can think about all the words that people mean. So it's just like we were talking about regional stuff, just like you were, Bonnie, talking about regional stuff that goes on, like pop and soda. That's a big
Yeah.
one. Okay.
Everything's Coke here. It's all
Yeah,
Coke,
because
no
it's
matter what it
South,
is.
right.
Yeah.
And whether it's a Pepsi or anything, it's still Coke.
It's Sprite, it's Coke, it's root beer, it's Coke.
Yeah.
In a bag lunch and a sack lunch. That was another one. When I was just like, people would be like, what? And you'd say, like, it's a bag lunch. And no, it's a sack lunch. No, it's a bag lunch. And it's like, yeah.
That's just lunch.
Yeah, it's just lunch, right? It's lunch in a container, but even I have words that pop out that are regional. So I can see, Ellie, this will be a fun experience for you, but you have grown so much in the time that I've been around you. And a lot of it does help you to be involved with a lot of things like this podcast and the good part of social media, right? Because there is a good part about it. There really is. It's just too bad there's a bad part of it.
It brought us together.
But yes, it did. Absolutely, it did. Without social media, a lot of us wouldn't be together, And I also think about things that have happened and people that I've lost track of. Now I may have found things out about them later that I'm like, ooh, gosh, right, exactly, like, ooh, but at the same time, it's being able to connect with people, and unfortunately, it's taken a swing another way, and people are using it for their own satisfaction, and that's really what it is. I mean, we've talked before about the chemical imbalances and things that happen in the brain with some of these people, and it's their chance to get that high. It's their chance to bully somebody, but actually it makes them feel better about themselves. And so I'm really happy with the way you've gone, Ellie, because I think when you get over here, it's just going to be great. It's just going to be great. And I want to see the differences as we go along, and some of the things like that, because you've got that really nice, innocent, sweet smile right now. You can come over here. But I think it's great for you. Go ahead.
I'm actually grateful for the way that it's 1 year since I start talking with Nana, and she kindly opened the way for me into the Star Trek fandom.
Yep.
And also Mark from other Facebook group actually tell me about this community, and I was like, well, let's join. And I'm actually glad that I met all of you. So yeah.
Good.
And thanks for the opportunity to practice my English.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
Well, and I just like, it's the fact of that a lot of us on are a different generation, you know, and so it's getting that aspect from you on what's going on. That's why I wanted to bring you on the podcast, because and then just the fact of that you were overseas too, you know, because people need to realize this is a worldwide problem. You know, it's not just here, it's everywhere, you know, and so it's very important that we get that kind of stuff out too. So Scott, we'll pop back to you for a minute. So now that you've gone through all this, what's your future look like? What do you feel your future is going to be? What do you feel coming down the pike for Scott? Oh, getting really I don't see, I even have problems with words types too. What I want to say, Ellie, so don't feel bad. You know,
we're all tongue-tied today.
Yeah, absolutely. But
where
do you see yourself?
Coming attractions, the trailer for the next 5 years. I think probably the biggest victory coming out of the last 3 to 5 years that I've had many issues that led up to a lot of PTSD, a lot of situations. I just feel like the fact that I know that there are coming attractions and having no idea that's what's coming is the biggest victory in the world. Because I've been telling myself nothing but failure for the last how long, and just sit around and wait to die and stuff like that. And now the fact that there is moving forward is so great. I would definitely love to head up a lot more of these conventions. I haven't done that since before the pandemic, any of that kind of stuff. I'd love to do some more traveling. I definitely am going to do tons of more writing, tons of more music, and hopefully getting to see and meet everybody in person. And community and moving around. Rex, I feel like I've known you forever. It's only been a few years.
I know. Well, and that's the thing about, you know, that's the thing about having this platform that we wouldn't have had back when we were young.
Absolutely.
You know, we didn't have this kind of stuff. So it's really great about that. And we didn't even touch on the pandemic and, you know, and being locked at home and things like that. And especially with somebody like you, now you're in a situation where you're not having that outside input coming in as much, you know, and people in person, that's been hard on everybody, you know, but that's something we didn't even touch on today. And I don't really want to touch on it because the pandemic was its own little thing itself. But I did get to meet a lot of people through the pandemic though. You know, that was the one thing about it was, you know, there's another ship called the Eisenberg that actually got kind of developed out of the whole pandemic. It was a pandemic ship, basically. I hate to say, but that's what it was. And it's become, you know, a huge organization too at that point because of that. So the pandemic brought some good, it brought some bad. And I know it was difficult on a lot of people, especially the outroverts like me. You know, I was used to going places and doing things and meeting people, and all of a sudden you couldn't, you know. And my wife looks at me at times and she goes, well, you're lucky you get to stay at home. It's not always a good thing. It really isn't always a good thing to sit at home. And my job kind of keeps me here. But there are times that when I get to go travel, it's my vacation from everything else. And people will be like, they're like, but that's work. And I go, nope, it's my vacation because I get to go see people. You know, so working at home isn't always the blessing everybody thinks it is, let me tell you.
It would drive me crazy, man.
Oh, great.
If I couldn't get out of these doors every day at the same time, I don't know what I would do.
I'm just so glad that we're kind of out of that now and stuff like that. So
I'm still stuck in that because of the immunosuppressant stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you are.
But I am trying to push for like the idea of having some of these venues who do live events. Like I have been prodding at, hey, can you maybe do a video feed? Like I realize I can't go to the dance club tonight. I'd really like to, but my friends during the pandemic, you know, they would do some, DJ on camera. And you know what? That was actually a whole lot of fun to dance by myself in my living room, if that's what it came down to.
Sure,
but I've been trying to those opportunities to spaces just to be more inclusive because the bottom line is that things are opening up, but then on the other hand, like
there's still
this could be a whole other topic, and I know you don't want to delve into it right now, but just even the shifting how to interact in public right now is a whole
Yeah.
other layer of anxiety that people are going through still. So
Yeah, we see that a lot of people lost their mind during the pandemic and came out differently, and we
yeah, it
see that
amplified a whole lot of stuff.
yeah, it has, and it's a different world from the pandemic because it did affect quite a bit of people. When they first came out, they didn't know how to socialize. You saw you look at just the airlines and the stuff that were going on airlines and within the airport. And I'm like, we didn't have this. We had some of it, but not as much as we have now. So it affected.
No, I body checked at Home Depot for wearing a mask. Like, what?
And just like, if you want to wear one, you wear one. If you don't right now. I get it. But it's just.
Yeah, like I'm on immunosuppressant, so this is like a my face thing, not a thing, dude.
Well, it's something that yes, you have to do. It's not like because the CDC says I don't have to do it anymore, I can just rip it off. No, I got to do it all the time because I have something that can affect me. So I totally get that. Well, Scott, we are so glad that we were able to talk to you today and having a chance to hear your story. I've always heard a lot of things that you have gone through talking to other people, but I've never heard the whole story at this point. So it was nice to hear the story. It's nice to see how you have recovered and become a survivor, which is important to a lot of people that are listening to this podcast that are still trying to work day through day with bullying that's going on there. There can be that light in the tunnel at that point. So it's so nice to hear somebody that actually went through several different things and actually was able to get themselves back, even though it's something that will always be with you, I know. But it's nice to see all the things that you're into now and the things and the resources and stuff like that that's out there that you're using. So really appreciate your time today, coming in. It always takes a little braveness for somebody to tell their story. And it always brings back things too at the same time. So we do appreciate you being here and also being part of the TAB podcast as our audio engineer. So we're really, really happy to have your wonderful talents with the podcast on how you help us out. So I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. I also want to say thank you to our hosts today, of course, that are on here. And even though she didn't talk a whole lot, she was here listening. I can tell you that. Kat King, who is actually our executive director, our executive producer for the show. I've got to get those terms right at this point. And of course, Bonfire. Why did I get Bonfire? Bonfire.
Because it's a variation, but you got it.
Yeah, I was close. Who's kind of our resident expert on everything. Ellie, who is our across the seas expert and soon to be American, and getting excited about her coming over here. And of course, I'm Rex Wood, and I'm the director of TAB. Want to tell you all, don't forget that you can join our organization on Facebook. There are two different pages you can go to. One is a page that's kind of an open public page, and the other page does require a membership into it. And that page is more for people who want to get more involved with the organization, find out more what they can do within their community at that point. But, there are a few couple questions you got to answer. It is a safe place, and we try to make it a safe place for our TAB people. When they're coming in, we want you to be there bully free. And so we do kind of watch what goes on there a lot. Also, we're proud to be part of the Subspace Radio Network now, and you can hear us there. We'll have more in the Facebook pages of when that will actually be premiering, probably be next year. But we're really excited about getting that out there at that point and being part of the Federation, who's been around for a long, long time. You can see the link that's up there to the Federation at trekfederation.com. And don't forget about our website at www.tabnation.org. Check it out. It's growing. Still needs some work, but it's growing at this point. So we're getting there at that point, but we appreciate each one of you tuning in, and we will see you hopefully in another month or so. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.